In this video, I'm going to do some architectural images and I'll show you how I process them in Photoshop. Let's get started. Well, I have done no shooting this weekend. It's 4 o'clock on a Sunday and had some interesting clouds out there, so I figure I'd go out and try some architectural images only about 10 minutes from my house. So heading over there now, see if I get anything good. I drove down to downtown White Plains, New York, and looking up at these two towers, some interesting cloud movement in the sky, and using a long exposure to capture some of the streaking clouds. And I think it's gonna be okay. I gotta take some shots and see how they come out. Well, I have a very cool situation now with some dark clouds in the sky against the building, which is still seeing some light bouncing off of it from other parts of the sky. And so just doing some long exposure, but I'm getting this very moody, contrasty scene that even without processing it, it looks pretty cool. Allow for a long exposure, I am using a neutral density filter. It's a 10-stop ND filter, which allows me to go out to a minute and a half from an exposure standpoint, and that's really what produces those streaking clouds in the sky. I switched lenses. I went to a wider angle lens to try to get more of the building in. So I'm using my 16 to 35 lens now, going all the way out to 16 millimeters, just to get a different perspective. Okay, well, I think I got some good shots. Why don't we do this? Why don't we jump into my computer right now, see how I process them in Photoshop. Okay, well, that shoot ended up better than I expected, and I got a bunch of good images. I'm going to process two of them, one in Lightroom, one in Photoshop. So here I am in Lightroom with one of the images. This is straight out of the camera, unedited, and actually is pretty good. I love the way the light is hitting the buildings, but certainly I want to improve it a bit. So first thing I almost always do is just use lens correction, hit enable profile corrections, and if there's any barreling effect, it gets rid of that. Usually it also reduces some of the vignetting around it. I'm just going to go into the basic panel, and I'm going to do a couple things. One, I'm going to add a little bit of contrast to the image, increase the drama, if you will. Pull down the highlights just a little bit. Definitely want to pull up the shadows because it's a fairly dark image. In addition, I can see from my histogram up here that I've got nothing on the far right of the histogram, so I want to increase my whites and bring that up to balance things out a little bit. Blacks are okay. I already have enough blacks. I'm not going to pull that down. I can add just a touch of clarity. And you know what? I'll add a little bit of vibrance and saturation, even though it's not a very colorful image. One last thing I can do, which is just kind of cool, is to take this light up here and add some light to it. So if we increase the exposure, really quite a bit, I'll increase the temperature as well. And I can go in there and just paint. Might be a little bright, but that should be okay. You get this really cool effect of the lamp looks like it's lit up, which I kind of like. So this is the first image. Let's move on to the second image. Okay, so here's the other image I want to process. I shift it over a little bit. This is an 86-second exposure. So you see the nice cloud movement. You get those streaks in the sky. I've already converted to black and white in Lightroom, and now I am in Photoshop. And I'll show you how I turn this image into this image. Remember, there's a lot of ways of doing the same thing in Photoshop. And so this is my methodology. If you have a different way or a better way, put a comment down below, because I can learn from it and so can others. I've already made a number of selections, and I use the polygonal lasso tool to select the sky and different parts of the buildings. And I'll be using those selections as I process this image. To make a selection, by the way, you go to Select, and you hit Save Selection, and you think of a name for it. Since I've made them, I can hit Load Selection, and I will start with the sky. And I want to darken the sky and add a lot of contrast to it. And so I'm going to use the Curves Adjustment layer, which I will be using throughout this video. I'm certainly want to pull down to darken it, certainly the darker parts of it. But those streaks of clouds, I really want them to pop, so I can pull up on the right to brighten up the highlights of the image. And so you get this nice contrast in the sky. Second thing I'm going to do is work with parts of the building. And so I'm going to start with the left tower, which again, I've already made that selection. And I want to create a gradient where it's much brighter on the top half of the image versus the bottom. And so again, I'll use a Curves Adjustment layer. What I'll do now is pull up, and I'm going to brighten up the entire image, really quite a bit. I then can reselect it, choose the gradient tool here on the left, and if my foreground is white, which it is, I can pull down from the top and create that gradient. And in fact, if you want to emphasize that more and darken the bottom, we can, since it's already selected, we can go to another Curves Adjustment layer, pull down, which again is going to darken the whole image. But then I can reselect it, got my gradient tool already selected, and pull up. And so now you get this nice contrast between the bottom part of this selection and the top half. I'll deselect this. I'm on a Mac, so I can hit Command D to deselect. I think it's Control D if you are on a Windows machine. But then I want to choose other parts of the building. So I'll choose the right tower. And very similarly, I'll choose a Curves Adjustment layer. I'll pull up to brighten up the entire selection. I'm going to go too far and lose detail, but that's pretty good. I can reselect it. Got my gradient tool. I will pull down from the top, and you get that nice gradient, and it really leads the eye up towards the top of this image. Last thing I want to do is this bottom piece of the building. It looks a little flat to me. I want that to pop. And so I'm going to load that selection, hit OK, choose my Curves Adjustment layer, pull up to brighten it up. And I think I want to use a gradient here as well. It just looks a little flat now. So I can reselect, got my gradient tool already selected. You know, if I pull down from here, you'll see that the top half of this gets brightened up, and it contrasts nicely against the other towers. And that's really how I did it. Listen, if you like the video, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you can see future videos. And until next time.